That's not him. That's a helmet on a stick. The Kyrex sniper's voice crackled with confusion just before a silent shot cracked through the valley and dropped the spotter behind him. 1 second, they thought they had eyes on a rookie. The next, their rear man was dead, and the rookie had vanished. And in the dirt near the fallen helmet, a single earth bullet was left standing straight up, planted there like a warning. It was supposed to be a sweep mission. A field exercise. Kyrex snipers had been bragging for years about their clean kills, their perfect triangulations, their supremacy in long-range warfare. So when a human drop pod crash-landed solo in the contested Javori 3 Badlands, they were practically laughing. The field commander approved a hunt rather than a strike. They called it a marksmanship warm-up. The target? A lone rookie human, freshly deployed and dumb enough to run right into the sniper quadrant. The betting pool in the Kyrex barracks was already full. Most wagers gave the human no more than 5 minutes of life. That was 7 minutes ago. The terrain was a baked shell of ridges and split canyons, ideal for snipers and worse for anyone trying to escape. The human came down hard, armor steaming, shoulders slumped like he'd never even seen a battlefield before. He didn't even run to cover. Just stepped out of the crater and stood there, blinking against the sun. One Kyrex observer muttered, "Too easy." The first sniper took position. Crosshairs aligned to the upper back, between the shoulder blades. Slow exhale. Fire. The impact didn't drop a body. It knocked the helmet off a dummy, revealing nothing beneath but a weight stack and a heat pack. The entire figure crumpled wrong, too light, too stiff. At that same moment, the spotter crouched 20 meters behind, let out a dry gasp and collapsed sideways, a hole seared through his visor. The shooter pivoted wildly, but it was already too late. The valley had turned against them. 3 kilometers away, Rhys Maddox lowered his scope and let the wind settle around him. He hadn't moved a muscle in 22 minutes. Not since planting the dummy hours earlier. His rifle didn't hum or spark like alien tech. It breathed with him. Analog, brutal, mechanical precision. While the Kyrex marveled at digitized targeting systems, Earth had gone the other way, developing silent rail suppressors and zero-thermal optics that couldn't be traced or blocked. And Rhys? He didn't need auto-calibration. He was the calibration. Command had asked him to go in quietly, let the aliens believe they were watching a trainee. Rhys agreed with one condition: no extraction until he sent the all-clear. Earth didn't just want to test the Kyrex. They wanted to break their myth. The myth that alien eyes could outshoot, outscout, and outlast the best Earth had to offer. But Earth had something different. Earth had people like Rhys, forged in decades of atmosphere war, asteroid conflicts, and zero-gravity operations. Soldiers who trained in storms, hunted in jungles, and could hold the trigger pull for hours without twitching. The Kyrex squad scrambled their coordinates, calling in secondary teams. 1 sniper dead was unfortunate. 2 meant something worse. The new teams were ordered to sweep with caution, believing they were up against an infiltration unit. That was their first mistake. Rhys didn't have a team. He didn't need one. The sun was starting to lower as Rhys repositioned. The second kill had bought him time, but it also warned them that he was mobile. He knew they'd try to triangulate, force him into a corner, maybe pin him near a ridge. But the valley had layers, and Rhys had already studied the fault lines. He found a hollow in the cliffs with a natural echo pocket. He could fire from it and make the report sound like it came from a completely different canyon. 10 minutes later, a new Kyrex duo crept along the outer wall of the ridge, their gear scanning wildly for thermal trails. One of them pointed out a heat spike at the top of the slope. They nodded, calculated a 2-minute crawl to elevation. As they moved, either of them noticed the tiny blinking device in the rocks behind them, motion-sensitive, low signature, and entirely human-made. When they passed, it chirped once. A kilometer away, Rhys pressed his cheek into the stock, checked wind again, and took the shot. The bullet curved down through 2 layers of rising air current before snapping into the lead Kyrex's backplate. The second one spun, but the sound was deceptive. It echoed behind him, and he fired the wrong direction. When he dropped into cover, a secondary shot took out the edge of his rifle, shearing off the barrel. Reese didn't finish him. He wanted word to spread. At the Kyrex forward base, General Vorn Talek received the report with a scowl. 4 confirmed kills, 1 incapacitated, and no heat trace. No audio. No scope flicker. Just bodies. He played the helmet cam footage from one of the scouts. It showed the field dummy getting shot, the false collapse, and then a bullet from nowhere taking out their spotter. Vorn paused the footage and zoomed in. There it was, buried in the sand. A single human bullet standing straight up, as if placed with intent. A message. Vorn stood slowly and crushed a chair leg under his boot. "This isn't a rookie," he muttered. "This is an executioner." He dispatched 3 more sniper units with overlapping coverage and authorized a scannet deployment. Not just hunting anymore. This was extermination. But by then, Reese was already 2 valleys ahead, packing up his nest and replacing it with another decoy. In his pack was an old earth playing card, an ace of spades with a bullet hole through the center. He always left it on the 3rd kill. He looked through his scope again. A new Kyrex team was setting up 500 meters below. One of them tapped his earpiece and laughed. Probably joking about his kill count. Probably thinking they'd be the ones to bring down the human. Reese didn't laugh. He just exhaled and whispered to himself. 4. Then he pulled the trigger. The claymore didn't kill them. That was the part that unsettled command the most. It was a warning, not an ambush. The explosive was embedded in a hollowed-out toy, a crude alien plush used by frontier settlers to mark graves. The Kyrex squad thought it was a joke. They approached it slowly, laughing, unaware of the tripwire looped beneath the sand. When it detonated, the blast sent dirt and confusion in every direction but left them alive, mostly. Then came the 2 shots. One snapped through the lieutenant's upper torso before the dust settled. The other took the squad medic in the ankle, spinning him sideways into the ridge. The survivors panicked, scrambling for cover. They didn't even know where the shots came from. Every sensor read clean. That was the point. Reese didn't fire blindly. He chose targets that mattered, the ones issuing orders, the ones healing wounds. He knew the chaos that would follow. He didn't need to eliminate them all. Just break them. He worked in patterns that didn't feel like patterns. A shot here, then silence. A booby trap there, then a discarded meal pack beside it. No heat signature. No digital trace. Kyrex tech depended on artificial overlays and scanning. Reese used wind, mud, and instinct. Every ridge became a question. Every shadow a doubt. They were starting to understand. Elsewhere, inside a mobile command ship hovering above the cliffs, General Talek stood with a bitter expression while reviewing the engagement footage. The Kyrex snipers weren't being slaughtered, they were being manipulated. He rewound to the claymore blast, then paused on the exact frame showing a set of footprints leading nowhere. "He's not attacking us," Talek muttered. "He's using us." The room fell quiet. No one wanted to say it aloud. No one wanted to acknowledge that a single human was causing their entire sniper unit to second-guess basic terrain. The general paced and called for Bralesike. That name, spoken with clipped reverence, made a few of the officers shift nervously. Bralesike wasn't a soldier. He was the Kyrex's sanctioned assassin, sent only when someone needed to disappear without a war. He didn't take orders. He took invitations. Reese, meanwhile, was already repositioned, lying prone near a dried-out ravine with high thermal inversion. The area distorted heat signatures just enough to hide him for another hour. He took slow, measured sips from a water tube and stared through his rifle's analog scope. He wasn't waiting for orders. He was waiting for a mistake. And one arrived soon enough. A 4-man recon squad moved in tight formation down the slope, visibly confident. One of them carried a drone, fast, silent, scanning every crevice. It was Kyrex's new counter-sniper drone. The theory was that it could detect pressure waves from distant shots. Reese smiled without shifting. He'd heard about these before deployment. and he had a surprise prepared. As the drone approached the ridge, Reese reached beside him and tapped a rock. A small switch clicked. 300 meters away, a modified speaker buried in the sand emitted the faint sound of a scope adjustment. The drone picked it up immediately and swerved toward it, zipping into position, scanning violently. The recon team followed it, sweeping their weapons in AV formation. They didn't notice the terrain shift beneath their boots. They didn't hear the snap until the tension cable ripped through their legs. Reese didn't fire. He didn't need to. One screamed. The rest dropped into defensive position, but now they were isolated, spread across the open. That's when he finally squeezed the trigger. The squad leader dropped with a cracked helmet. Another rolled into cover, only to land in a thorn cluster that injected a mild neurotoxin, harmless, but disorienting. The last two opened fire on the sound source, wasting ammo on a speaker lodged under a rock. High above, Brelesik arrived at the command post, helmet under one arm. His expression was blank. Talek turned to him and said nothing. He simply pointed to the tactical screen showing Reese's known movement zones and current presumed kill count. Brelesik scanned it and nodded once. He didn't ask for a team. He didn't request support. He walked out and disappeared into the dropship bay. Reese rotated locations again, leaving his decoy gear behind. He stuffed a fake sniper log into a thermal pouch and planted it near a ledge. Anyone who found it would assume they'd finally picked up a trail. Inside the pouch, however, was a microscopic beacon that would relay every movement the carrier made. He expected them to take it. People always wanted proof of the ghost. Back in the valley, another alien team retrieved the pouch and signaled command. Excitement bloomed. They believed they had something now. They called in a containment squad. Minutes later, their position was marked by a storm of dust, an approaching convoy. Reese watched from over a kilometer away as Kyrek's armored troops swarmed the cliff. Then, at precisely the wrong moment, the ground beneath them caved in. Reese had charted the fault line 2 nights earlier. A shallow cave sat beneath the cliff, hollowed out by water erosion centuries ago. All it needed was a directional charge. He had placed one there that morning and waited for the right moment. When the rock crumbled and 30 soldiers fell into a sinkhole of broken stone, the entire battlefield fell still. The psychological weight of what was happening rippled up the command chain. Vorn Talek clenched his fists and muttered, "He's orchestrating the terrain." Brelesik, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. "He's not hunting us. He's rehearsing on us." Talek turned. "You think he's practicing?" "No," Brelesik replied. "He already knows how to kill us. This is him refining the message." The message was becoming clearer with every shot, every trap, every untouched corpse left as a warning. Reese wasn't just eliminating targets. He was changing doctrine. Making the Kyreks question their fundamentals. Their trust in scanners. Their confidence in overlapping fields. Night fell fast on Javori 3, and the winds picked up across the dunes. Reese was already on the move, traversing sideways across the ridgeline, planting another false trail, and scanning for the one anomaly he knew was coming. The Kyreks were clever enough to adjust. They'd eventually stop sending standard teams. They'd escalate. He found a scuff in the rock that didn't match the environment. Clean boot edge. Slight inward roll. Whoever made that step walked like a killer, not a scout. Reese didn't touch it. He just noted the angle. He adjusted his scope again, not for a kill, this time for a test. He whispered to himself, "Come on, assassin. Let's see what you brought." Then he vanished into the fog. The first shot wasn't a kill. That surprised both of them. Brelesik had waited nearly 3 hours without moving, buried under a thermal sheet, waiting for the exact window of movement. The second Reese flicked his hand to adjust his sling strap, Brelesik fired. The angle was perfect. The wind was 0. The math was clean. And yet, the bullet punched through a reflective panel instead of flesh. The scope shimmered in the light, distorting the true position, and Brelesik's eyes narrowed. That wasn't a rookie's mistake. That was a master's sleight of hand. Before he could adjust, something small buzzed past his helmet and vanished into the underbrush. He froze. Not because it was loud, but because it wasn't. Reese had deployed a microdrone, barely larger than a pebble, silent and analog-guided. It carried no weapon. Just a camera. And it had just fed him a clean angle of Bralesica's left flank. Reese lay 200 meters lower, near a ledge disguised by a thermal sink. He didn't shoot. Not yet. He wanted confirmation. He watched Bralesica reposition. Calculated his step timing. Studied the heel pressure from footprints. Most soldiers leaned forward. Bralesica leaned slightly back. Too balanced. Too still. That was how you spotted a killer. Reese adjusted his rifle down 1/2 click. The valley between them wasn't loud, but the wind pattern curved strange, so he waited. 30 seconds. Then a small rock clattered from Bralesica's slope. Not kicked. Placed. Bait. Reese didn't move. He didn't even blink. He waited again. 60 more seconds. Then he reached slowly for his sidearm and flicked the safety on, letting the tiny click echo. It was bait in return. Bralesica turned his head slightly, almost imperceptibly, and exhaled. He had heard it. That was the difference. A normal sniper would panic, start scanning, start shifting. Bralesica simply adjusted a single breath and recalibrated his trajectory. These weren't snipers playing games. This was 2 apex predators stalking in silence, each waiting for a pattern to crack. 2 hours passed without a shot. Then Reese shifted the rules. He let out a sharp whistle, one long note, like a bird call but too perfect. Bralesica's eyes narrowed. The echo bounced oddly. He couldn't place it. He scanned the lower ridge and fired a single round toward a likely ledge. No movement. But the second he turned back, another whistle came from behind. He swiveled. A shadow darted across the rocks. He fired again. Missed. He had just been drawn into wasting 2 rounds. He growled. Not with frustration, but with respect. Reese meanwhile was repositioning again, this time to a hollow tree with direct line of sight on Bralesica's elevation. He knew the back and forth was only beginning. A direct kill wouldn't come easy. This was about stacking pressure. Slowly. Mentally. Reese planted a spent casing in the dirt right near a heat sink zone. Bralesica would find it. Would wonder why it was there. Would overthink the trajectory. He was injecting doubt. Back at the Kyrex command station, Von Talek was reviewing the updated data stream. Half his snipers had stopped transmitting. The recon team had retreated to perimeter. The only active feed came from Bralesica's helmet cam. But even that had gone static now, intentionally scrambled. Vorn slammed a hand against the table and barked. How is one human unraveling a division of snipers? No one answered. They knew the truth. It wasn't just anyone. It was the ghost in the dirt. Bralesica finally moved. Deliberately. He stepped into the open, letting the sky backlight his figure. It was a challenge. He stood with rifle lowered, daring Reese to take the shot. But Reese knew that posture. It was a trap. The second he fired, Bralesica would roll into cover and backtrack. So Reese did something unexpected. He stood up. Not fully. Just enough to be seen. Enough to say he wasn't afraid. The stare lasted 12 seconds. No bullet. No movement. Just the tension of 2 predators reading each other. Then Reese raised his rifle, not to shoot, but to salute. Bralesica tilted his head slightly, then raised his own. The moment passed. Then both disappeared into their respective terrain. The game had shifted. This wasn't hunter and prey anymore. It was sniper versus sniper, rulebook discarded. Reese moved deeper into the canyons, knowing Bralesica would shadow him now, silently, methodically. He laid out subtle distractions. A dangling glove. A half-buried ration pack. Each one placed at an angle to suggest a hurried escape. Bralesica ignored most, but stopped at the glove. It wasn't human military issue. It was Kyrex. He picked it up and turned it over. Inside was a note scratched in dry ink on alien parchment. One word. Closer. He didn't react. He simply dropped the glove and kept walking. Night fell fast. The moons over Javori 3 cast long shadows, and the rock heat faded quickly. Rhys took position behind a cold stone wall, listening. Then he heard it. A breath. Barely. Someone had exhaled through their nose behind a ledge. Rhys rotated slowly, scanning angles. He spotted it. The shimmer of a scope lens. But it wasn't Bralesike. It was another Kyrex sniper. A backup. Probably hoping to end the match early. Rhys smiled to himself. Bad move. He sighted in and squeezed. The alien dropped silently, slumping against the stone. Bralesike, who had been circling nearby, heard the shot and immediately understood. That sniper had been trying to interfere. Rhys had handled it without hesitation. In response, Bralesike left a marker. A string of teeth, animal teeth, bound in thread, hung from a branch just ahead of Rhys's next predicted move. It wasn't a threat. It was a tradition. A symbol of respect. A warrior's message. Rhys found it, stared for a long second, then removed one tooth and tied it around his own scope. They both knew the ending was coming. But neither wanted it to be rushed. This wasn't just a fight anymore. It was art. And it had to end right. At dawn, Bralesike placed a single slug on a rock. Polished. Untouched. He stood behind it, fully visible. Rhys, already watching, understood the signal. One last duel. One shot each. No distractions. No traps. Just a contest of truth. He adjusted his rifle. Checked his breath. The valley was silent. The next bullet would write history. The wind was soft that morning, not still, but delicate, just enough to whisper lies to any scope that wasn't prepared. Rhys lay prone, buried under dust and faded brush, breathing slow, hands steady. Across the valley, Bralesike stood motionless behind a jagged spire of obsidian-colored stone. They had spent hours getting to this moment. Now either moved. Neither flinched. Between them, over 1,000 meters of uneven terrain, soft ridges, elevation dips, and microcurrents. Most shooters wouldn't even attempt the shot. Rhys didn't hesitate. He simply waited. He didn't aim at Bralesike's head. Not his heart. He aimed at the scope itself. Not to kill, yet, but to make the message louder than death. Both men knew the rules now. They had agreed to them without speaking. One shot each. One chance. Not to prove superiority, but to earn recognition. Bralesike made the first movement. A nod. Subtle. Rhys exhaled once. It was on. Time slowed. Bralesike's finger tightened just as Rhys's trigger reached its break point. 2 rounds left barrels almost simultaneously, traveling through opposite currents of the same wind field. Rhys's bullet spun tighter, faster, curved downward just enough to account for planetary rotation. Bralesike's round screamed straight across the valley. Both impacts occurred at once. Bralesike's bullet shaved the tip of Rhys's shoulder plate, a shallow wound, not lethal. But Rhys's round cracked cleanly against Bralesike's rifle, hitting the outer ring of his scope and shearing it off completely. Bralesike stood stunned for a second. His hands hadn't moved. His eyes hadn't blinked. But the weapon was disabled, and the message was clear. Rhys didn't move. He didn't aim again. He just waited, watching. Bralesike looked down at the broken scope, then slowly knelt and set his rifle on the ground. He reached into his pack and pulled out something small. A strip of cloth, white, faded, scarred with old writing. He tied it to the muzzle of his disabled rifle and left it there. That was a gesture ancient in Kyrex warrior code. A recognition not of defeat, but of having been outplayed. He picked up the bullet that had fallen near his feet and held it up toward the ridgeline. Rhys, still watching, gave a slight nod, then turned and crawled away from his position. There was no celebration. No taunt. No transmission. Just silence. Back at the Kyrex command post, confusion rippled across the monitors. The observers hadn't tracked either sniper in real time. All they received were delayed audio feeds, distorted terrain scans, and the abrupt cessation of Bralesike's rifle telemetry. General Tolek stared at the screen with a clenched jaw. His top assassin was off the grid. His elite snipers were either neutralized, scattered, or refusing orders. The sniper division had crumbled without a conventional fight. They hadn't been destroyed. They had been dismantled psychologically. Tolek demanded footage. The recovery team eventually deployed 2 hours later and located Bralesike still standing at the ridgeline, overlooking the valley, holding the earth bullet in one hand. He didn't speak. When asked for a report, he handed over his disabled rifle and said only one sentence. The human didn't miss. That was all. Reese moved quickly now, not rushing, but with intent. His pack was lighter. He left behind extra decoys and disabled traps so they couldn't be reused or studied. He crossed the canyons under fading light, heading toward the old relay station built into the rocks. It was a civilian facility, decommissioned and abandoned, but still had a functioning uplink system if powered manually. He didn't care about extraction. He just needed to send one transmission. When he arrived, he placed a small power cell into the wall socket and flipped 3 switches. The panel buzzed. Reese connected his comms, selected a secure Earth channel, and uploaded the log. He included no commentary. Just video feeds from helmet cam, audio pulses, target records, and timestamps. The file name was simple. Confirmed. That was enough. Back on Earth, in a subterranean operations chamber, a group of officers gathered around the encrypted feed as the mission log unfolded in silence. They watched Bralesike's rifle shatter. Watched the surrender cloth flutter. Watched the bullet being held up with reverence. One officer finally said, "He just ended their sniper doctrine in a day." Another said, "Maybe we don't need an army. We just need more ghosts." Meanwhile, Reese sat under a ledge near the uplink tower, chewing on dry rations, eyes never fully relaxed. He knew better than to let his guard down yet. He waited for another hour before a rustle caught his attention. A single Kyrex scout emerged from the ridge below, hands raised. No weapon. No armor. Just a small pouch and a quiet expression. Reese aimed but didn't fire. The scout approached slowly, then knelt and placed the pouch down before backing away. Inside was a piece of Kyrex war parchment, wrapped around a small curved bone. The symbol of a ceasefire offering. It wasn't common. In fact, Reese had never seen it delivered by anyone but a war chief. The note inside said only this: "Our marksman will not return. Respect to the invisible eye. The hunter leaves in peace." Reese tucked the bone token into his belt and stood. The mission was over. Not by broadcast, not by explosion, but by acknowledgement. The valley was silent now, not with fear, but with respect. He made his way down the slope, past the crater his pod had made days ago. The sand had settled. The blood had dried. And in the distance, vultures circled lazily, searching for scraps that no longer existed. Back aboard Earth's orbiting carrier, the command console received a single ping. Reese's status showed green. Confirmed alive. Extraction coordinates requested. The console pinged back. Arrival in 9 minutes. An old Earth proverb blinked briefly on screen before fading. One shot, one message. The drop craft found him alone, seated on a rock, head down, rifle across his knees. As the bay doors opened, the pilot glanced once and whispered, "That's him. The ghost who trained the warlords." Reese stood up, slung his rifle, and walked into the craft without a word. Behind him, in the dust, a single Earth bullet remained half buried in the rock. Engraved with a single phrase: "For the ones who watch too slow." The descent into Earth's atmosphere was quiet, just the way Reese liked it. The transport hummed steadily, shielding him from view and thought, carrying him through layers of clouds and coated airspace. Below him waited the debrief room, the kind with one table, 2 chairs, and a one-way mirror nobody pretended was anything else. Most returning soldiers feared it. Reese didn't. He had no lies to hide, no spin to pitch, and no excuses to give. The facts were all recorded. The bullet that broke a doctrine, the silence that shattered an army, the final duel that didn't end in blood but in a white cloth. Some missions needed full autopsies. This one only needed a signature. He stepped off the transport and onto the steel runway where two officers were already waiting. One of them saluted awkwardly, then lowered his hand when Reese ignored it and kept walking. His boots echoed through the corridor like the only sound in the world. Down the hall, through the scanners, past walls where soldiers' names were etched into metal. Names earned, not given. Reese's wasn't there. He had refused it every time they offered. The real ghosts didn't need their names remembered. They lived in the stories others whispered. Inside the debrief room, his commander waited. A tired man with sharp eyes and a coffee mug that never seemed to empty. He didn't stand when Reese entered. Just motioned toward the chair. Reese sat, dropped his rifle gently on the table between them, and pulled a file from his pack. He slid it across. The commander didn't touch it immediately. Instead, he leaned back and asked, "How many confirmed?" Reese shrugged. "Doesn't matter," he said. "They won't forget even one." The commander finally opened the file, scanning quickly. Scouting logs. Satellite pings. Kill angles. Environmental conditions. And then the hand-signed ceasefire from the Kyrex scout. The commander held it up like it was made of glass. "Did they really deliver this?" he asked. Reese nodded once. "They're done," he added. "At least with us." The silence hung heavy for a moment before the commander said, "So what now? You want rest, reassignment, rotation." Reese looked at the wall, then down at his rifle. He tapped the barrel once with his finger and said, "I want a new barrel and a heavier bolt. That scope's starting to drift." The commander blinked. "You're not done." Reese leaned forward. "Not while there are people out there pointing weapons at Earth like we're still amateurs. Not while they still think humans only win by luck." He stood, but the commander raised a hand. "One last question," he said. "Why didn't you kill Brala-CK? You had the shot. You never miss." Reese paused at the doorway. "Because I didn't have to. He's going to do more damage alive than dead. Letting him live proves we never needed to pull the trigger first." Outside the building, the air was clean and cool. The world moved slow compared to the heat and whisper death of alien planets. Reese stepped off the landing pad and onto the old training fields. They were empty now, long since automated. Drones hovered in lazy circles. Target boards reset themselves. But Reese walked past them and toward the long-abandoned observation bunker at the far end. Inside, beneath a cracked ceiling and dust-covered monitors, he found an old locker. No lock. Just rust. Inside was a box. His box. The one he left behind after his final instructor told him he would never be good enough for long-range ops. He had never come back for it. He opened it now. Inside were the first pair of gloves he ever used, still blood-stained. A bent scope reticle from a failed simulation. And a coin. Standard military issue. One side bore Earth's crest. The other was blank. A test coin, given only to candidates who never fully passed, never fully failed. He picked it up and pocketed it. Not because it meant anything anymore, but because it was part of the trail he'd carved. Back in orbit, Kyrex Intelligence had quietly shut down their sniper program. No announcements. No council votes. They just removed it from the registry. Their internal logs recorded it as a temporary suspension. The truth was simpler. No one wanted to pick up a scope. Every new recruit now heard the story of Javori 3. How a single human used wind and silence to erase an entire hunting force. Some believed it. Others denied it. But none volunteered for sniper training. The myth was more powerful than the data. Brala-CK, now without rank, traveled quietly through border planets. He no longer wore a uniform, nor carried a rifle. Instead, he taught in silence. Marksmanship, strategy, humility. He carried a single bullet with him. Earth-made. Engraved. He never explained where it came from. When asked, he only said, "I met a man who didn't miss." That was all. Back on Earth, Reese stood in the shadow of a scorched oak tree, the one hit during a training drill years ago when he missed a shot by 3 inches and nearly hit a civilian drone. That was his only recorded miss. Some people said it taught him humility. Others said it haunted him. Reese just remembered it as the day he learned what wind really was. He reached into his pouch and pulled out the Kyrex bone token. He tied it to a nail on the oak tree and let it swing. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Every sniper walks with a shadow. Every bullet speaks 2 languages. One in pain. One in silence. He never forgot that. As he turned to leave, a young recruit approached. Nervous, stiff, clearly not briefed on who Reese was. She saluted and asked, "Sir, are you the one they call the Ghost?" Reese looked at her, studied the tremor in her fingers, the way she held her rifle just a little too tight. He didn't answer directly. Just said, "I've seen ghosts. Some of them wear medals. Some wear scars." Then he walked past her, into the training yard, and took his place at the 100-meter line. He set his rifle down, adjusted the old scope one last time, and waited for the wind to shift. When it did, he smiled. It was perfect.